Oh, everybody, welcome to our Saturday morning webinar. And I'm so glad to be here and making sure that all of our technology, as always, is working seamlessly. And I am Judy Feldhausen, and I am joined today with my co-host, Bob Wischmeier. So good morning, Bob.
Good morning, Judy. Thanks, you guys, everybody, for joining us this morning. Thank you so much. We've got a lot of stuff here today, so Judy, let's just launch into this.
Absolutely. You know, for just this little phrase here. So we are going to continue with our 12 laws of success, and we are on the chapter that Les Brown has entitled, Light Up Each Room as You Enter. Sounds simple, doesn't it? And, but there is a lot on being able to do this. And I can tell you that from experience. So why don't we go ahead and talk about this slide, Bob. And I know that this hit home with you.
It did. I think, and I would preface my thoughts today, too, with a very clear understanding that, we are all different one from another. Some of us are way more introverted or extroverted than our fellows. And so we need to keep that in mind. We're not trying to change anyone's personality here. That's not it at all. But no doubt Les Brown is definitely an extrovert. And when he says every person, or when William Ward says every person has the power to make some others happy, some do it simply by entering a room and others by leaving the room, I couldn't help but grin, and I did my journal, Judy.
And it is so true. And you make such a good statement, Bob, because, I'm going to talk about some people that light up a room as they enter, and they do it completely different. It's kind of like, a fluorescent light and an incandescent. They both do a good job, but they do it differently, right?
They do. Yeah, absolutely. On our next slide, Judy, are you okay if I share that little story?
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, when we talk about, how different we are with a relationship that we're either takers or we're givers or whatever. And as soon as I was looking at the slide and reading through Les Brown's writings, I thought of a story that I had read years ago that really impacted me. It's called There Are Two Seas in Palestine. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with it, but I'm just going to read through it. It's just brief. It says, there are two seas in Palestine. One is fresh, and fish are in it. Splashes of green adore its banks. Trees spread their branches over it and stretch out their thirsty roots to sip of its healing waters. The River Jordan makes this sea with sparkling water from the hills. So it laughs in the sunshine, and men build their houses near to it, and birds their nests, and every kind of life is happier because it is there. The River Jordan flows on out into another sea. Here there is no splash of fish, no fluttering leaf, no song of birds, no children's laughter. Travelers choose another route unless on urgent business. The air hangs heavy above its water, and neither man nor beast nor fowl will drink. What makes this mighty difference in these neighbor seas? It's not the River Jordan. It empties the same good water into both. Not the soil in which they lie, not in the country round about. This is the difference. The Sea of Galilee receives, but does not keep the Jordan. For every drop that flows into it, another drop flows out. The giving and receiving go on in equal measure. The other sea is shrewder, hoarding its income jealously. It will not be tempted into any generous impulse. Every drop it gets, it keeps. The Sea of Galilee gives and lives. This other sea gives nothing. It is named dead. There are two kinds of people in this world. There are two seas in Palestine. Judy.
That's powerful. Very powerful. And we may know of people that are completely givers and people that are completely takers. And Bob, you made a point about having the ability to give and to receive.
Yeah, there's a balance, isn't there? There's a balance there.
It absolutely is. And, even just you and I, Bob, it's so great to work with you because you have your passion and what you do best. And, and I have some things that I do best. And so we are able to give and take even today on this webinar.
Yeah, it's true. It's a wonderful thing. I mentioned in my notes to Judy earlier that I have a cousin who we visit with fairly often, and when she comes over, she talks nonstop about herself and her family and her husband. We've been cousins for 68 years. We were born in the same year, and I'll bet you $1 that my cousin Linda couldn't tell you the names of my children. I know everything about her family, everything. But she's just one of those ladies who just takes. Anyway, just interesting how different we all are from one another, Judy.
Absolutely. So then how do you receive value? And that for a lot of people is tough. And I know, Bob, you mentioned that it has been tough for you, and it's also been tough for me. I was raised with the idea that you don't take, that you only do for others. And so it was really hard for me when someone started being nice, giving me things. I didn't even know how to accept it, what to do. And I would try to refuse it, which of course I learned is definitely a mistake.
Yeah, it's Bonnie taught me something a long time ago with regard to children, for example. When a little child tries to give you something, whether you want to take it or not, you should take it. Little children's hearts are so pure, and when they try to give you something, it is from their heart. And so, they come up and hand you a cookie that's fallen in the mud, and you just smile and graciously receive because it comes directly from their heart. But it is a challenge. And like you, Judy, for me during the course of my lifetime, I've had a really difficult time receiving from other people. It's really easy for me to help others, to go out of my way to give help to other people. But it's always been a little tough. We've had kind of a tough year with losing our son and my sister, but we received an enormous amount of gracious, heartfelt help this last year, especially last fall when we were going through the thick of that. And it was extremely humbling. I've got to tell you, I don't know how we would have made it through the loss of our son if it hadn't been for the generosity of just dozens and dozens of people, Judy.
Yes. And one of the best lessons that I learned was in being from the receiving end is that the best thing to do is just say thank you. And it seems so simple, but a heartfelt thank you is so appreciated by the giver that it's going to add value to the gift when the giver knows that it is appreciated. So,
absolutely.
Just being able to appreciate and to receive graciously is so huge.
Well, yeah, you're spot on. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then how do you give? How do you give without being boastful? And how do you give without expecting something in return? Sometimes the gift that we give, we expect the other one to receive it with as much importance as we are giving it. And perhaps, we have something attached to that gift that doesn't transfer to the receiver. So how do you give with value?
You know, I have a friend, his wife once told me that whenever he does something for someone else, there's always a string attached to it. That's not a good thing. You don't tie a string onto something that you give to someone that has value to it. That's just not how it works. That's not the way it should work. I wanted to take note too that I think that being observant is key to this when it comes to giving value to, especially if you're reaching out to express some measure of service or to help someone. Be observant. It's amazing what you can see around you, the needs of others, just with a glance. It's being observant, I think, anyway, is key to this. I was going to share, Judy, an experience that we just had here a few days ago. On May 20th was our son Gabe's birthday. He would have been 41 years old, and you know, he passed away last September. And as we talked as a family of 4 other children, my daughter, I only have one daughter, 4 boys and 1 girl, and my daughter Jess came up with the idea that as we had a Zoom meeting actually like this, and Jessica said, I think we should do 41 acts of kindness to celebrate his life, to show honor to Gabe, because he was always helping people. And so she broke it down. She's the boss, and she broke that down. And so the rest of us, we all had, if you will, kind of an assignment to do. It's kind of weird to have an assignment to do a random act of kindness, but it was a perfect concept. And we did that. And then the other thing was that we would all cook a really fun dinner, and then we'd have a Zoom meeting and show each other what we had fixed for dinner, because he was a food guy, and talk about these acts of kindness that we would be performing to honor our son. That's how we chose to give value on his birthday. We helped other people, 41 different people. It was a beautiful experience. And as we shared in that Zoom meeting at the end of the day on Gabe's birthday, there were tears. It was a touching experience. And so, you know, giving value can be done in a lot of different ways. But again, getting back to, I think, the need to be observant as individuals to see where are the needs. You can't define a need if you can't see it. Judy?
That is so true. And, you know, along with that, Bob, that's such a magnificent story and just so touching, and being able to give like you are without expecting in return is so awesome. And, you know, sometimes we give value and we don't know it. I talked to someone a couple days ago that I hadn't seen in 2 years. And we were talking about the time we were together. And it was a couple, Andrea and Ivan. And Andrea said to me, I still remember and think about what you said to me so often. And until she said it, I hardly really remembered the conversation. But as she brought it back to my mind, yes, I remember the conversation, but I didn't realize the value of what we shared. And to her, it was huge. So we've got to be careful all the time on how we're giving value, because we can give positive value and we can give negative value without even realizing the effect it's going to have on the person that's receiving it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you know, I think it's really important to remember that you know, you have to watch what you say to people. Be cognizant of the things you share. Sometimes we open our mouths way too quickly. We don't think before we speak. And you know, I used to tell my kids, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can break my heart. Something to keep in mind. We want to give value, not hurt people.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So bringing out the greatness in others. So I chose this picture because I used to be a gymnast, and I always had a spotter that helped me, guided me, and propelled me and caught me when things didn't go right. So this picture just hit home for me as bringing out the greatness in other people is like like being a spotter for them, to be able to be there and support them and guide them and catch them when they fall.
Yeah, that's a great slide. It's a great concept. When I was looking at this slide, when you were first shared these with me earlier in the week, and I was reading through the book, I thought about some of the individuals in my personal life who really helped me. I don't know that there's anything great that's come out of my life, but I had a handful of men. I grew up in a family basically without a father, a stepfather for a number of years, but he didn't pay much attention to me, and we didn't even converse, actually. But as a married man, as a young married guy and father, I ended up having some tremendous men who came into my life who were mentors to me, who literally changed my life and really helped to bring the greatness out in my life. They taught me how to be a father, taught me how to be a leader, really. And I'm grateful to them forever and for always. I think of these men often because of their kindness and guidance that they gave me in my life to help me. And it's been profound. I mean, I love these men for doing that. They've helped to bring out the greatness in me. And I guess maybe to a certain extent, they're observant, observed me and saw that, well, there's some leadership potential on here. I want to help Bob. And they did. They did.
Right. And so in essence, I'm sure what they did and who they were really was a beacon for you.
Well, yeah, it's like my father-in-law. I think I've mentioned this before, but when I met Bonnie clear back in summer of 1973, he was the strongest human being I'd ever met in my life. 18.5-inch neck. Couldn't even wear a watch because he couldn't get a watch band to go over his wrist. It was so thick. Guy was just a powerhouse, but he was also that way in his personal life. When her dad walked into a room, you just knew everything was going to be fine. He was just a beacon of strength everywhere he went. Never swore. He was this roughy, tough truck driver who just knew who he was. He didn't have to cuss or act, tough. He just was tough. And that set an example for me going forward in my life. I wanted to be like that. I could never be physically like him, but I wanted to be that guy. And so, yeah, these people come into our lives, Judy, who are just a beacon. We want to be like them, and it can be really profound.
Yes, and one of the things that I learned in coaching early on was that we bring the weather with us wherever we go. And if we go into a room with clouds over our head, it brings the room down. But if we can come as a beacon, as a light, as the source of the light, it's amazing the change that will happen. In a room, in a store. I know I've been able to go in a store and talk to a cashier who has been really, really down and upset and just negative to me. And when I bring positivity to her and light into her life, everything changes.
It does. It does. I'm glad to hear you say that. I've made a point of that almost my entire life, to try to bring that kind of energy back into a situation. Yeah. Thank you for doing that and for sharing that. That's important.
It is. And sometimes it's just by brightening someone's day, right, with a smile.
I was thinking about Mary Poppins, how are you? Practically perfect in every way. When you say those kinds of things to people, it changes the situation almost immediately. It really does. And, Les Brown talks about Louis Armstrong singing, "When you're smiling, the whole world smiles with you." And there's just value. And of course, it's much easier for an extroverted individual to share that kind of feeling than it is for an introverted person. And I get that clearly. I was going to share just a little thing here. This is a fairly personal kind of a webinar that we do. We're not just presenting material here. We're calling on the pulpit of memory in our personal lives in order to share with you the things that Les Brown has shared with us. And so just, I was thinking about Louis Armstrong and my son, and I keep going back to this with my son, and well, I'm not going to apologize for that. It's just on my mind. And this whole webinar today relates to him. But he was a vocalist. He graduated from a performing arts school in New York, was a remarkable singer. And a few days after he passed away, I woke up one morning and I was dreaming about him. It was the first dream that I'd had with my Gabe in it. And it's just completely random. You know how dreams are, but we were just in a house somewhere. And he just sort of gently started singing that song, I see trees of green, red roses too. You know that song, It's a Wonderful World? Is that the name of it? I can't even remember the name of it.
Yes.
Louis Armstrong. Yeah, and he had such a pretty voice, this beautiful, strong, tender voice. Anyway, in this dream, he started to just sing it. I'd never heard my son sing that song before, ever, never. But I heard him clearly singing that. It was just like, it's okay, Dad. Everything's all right. I'm good, It was the neatest thing. It was a sacred, wonderful moment. And it totally changed how I was feeling that day. It totally brightened my life. And I think it came from beyond this world. But that kind of thing can happen. And so share it with you.
Wow. That's so awesome. To be able to hear someone's voice, I can't even imagine, because I think that's one of the first things that I forgot from people that I loved and lost was their voice. So that's an amazing, amazing blessing.
It was really cool. I shared it with my daughter and my son who were here. This was just prior to the funeral. And I got a little text message from my daughter. She was in a Costco store in Bozeman, Montana, walking through Costco, and where all the TVs and stuff were set up. That Louis Armstrong song started to play. She just stopped dead in her tracks, stood there and listened for a while, tears running down her face. It created a personal family experience, but it brightens our day. I think of it often, so I wanted to share it with you.
Yes, and so there are so many things we can use to brighten someone's day. And part of it, I think, really is about memory. And you were right, Bob. This is a personal picture. This is my grandson, Micah. I was looking for a thoughtful picture and thought, you know what, he could do this. So this is my grandson, Micah, thinking about things and trying to remember. And for me personally, I tell you, this was a tough one. And it continues to be challenging. I have to really concentrate and focus. And part of it, I think, is developing those listening skills. And when we teach listening, we talk about level 2 listening, which is totally focusing ourselves on the other person, to be able to put what they say into our memories so that we can bring them back up later. Because, sometimes when you're talking to someone, there's other things on your mind. And, I know for me, if I get busy, all I can think about is what I am doing, not even who I am being, but what I am doing. So to be able to get into that focused listening, to be able to concentrate on what they are saying so that I can remember later that conversation and what was important to them.
Yeah, you got to focus. Stu Rudder was just a whiz at this. Stu Rudder, who used to be one of our corporate executives, Stu Rudder remembered everyone's names. It was incredible. You'd be in a room full of people in a meeting, and when Stu would get up to speak, he he would call every person in the room by name. He made a point of it. It was interesting. But we all know our names, and our names are important to us. Years and years ago, I had a ministry. I had almost 2,500, well, I had over 2,500 people in my ministry. And one day I was in the town, Lolo, Montana, of all the places. In one of our buildings there, I happened to be walking through the chapel, and there was one person in there. Just one guy was sitting in there. It was before meetings started. As I walked by, I just reached down with my left hand and just put my hand on his shoulder and said, "Hey, Kerry, how you doing?" And he looked up at me, kind of a shocked look on his face, and good, And then I just kept going. I had things I was doing, and I got a phone call later that afternoon from another friend of mine who told me that when I did that, when I just touched Kerry on the shoulder and said hello, that's all I did, was just say hello, asked him how he was doing. But in reality, that man was having a horrendous day. His business was falling apart. He had problems at home. And the fact that as a church leader, when I walked by that, I knew him even by his first name, called him by name, touched him physically. It just had a profound effect on him that day, in that moment. And it changed things. It lifted that pall that was over him. It just lifted it and changed his day completely for him. That's the power of remembering someone's name. That's the power of having a positive attitude as you go through life, Judy.
Yes. And, and another thing to remember about people is, all the time we don't meet them face to face. We may meet over the phone or on Zoom or however. And one of the things that I've started doing is actually taking notes. So last week I did a presentation about LinkedIn, and I'm talking to 3 and 4 people a day that I don't know. I know their names, I know what they're saying on their profiles, and that's it. And so I talk to them on the phone, one after the other, and I can get people mixed up together. It's just the truth, Is this guy the dog guy, or does he own the networking group? I don't even remember. So by taking notes and I take notes about their life, their family, their kids, their hobbies, and who they are. And what they want to accomplish with their business. And by doing that, next time I talk to them, oh my gosh, I can remember, because I go to the notes and I see just a few words. I don't take lengthy notes. I'll just put, dog whisperer, lives in a bad neighborhood, wants to open more dog schools. That's Toriano. He's an amazing person. But I know how amazing, because I have just those few notes about that I've written, and it makes, at least for me, such a difference, because the faintest ink is better than the most retentive memory. Yeah,
great. That's such good counsel. I think we want to make a note here too that, there's this attraction over ego that's extremely important to remember too. How do you present yourself when you do meet people, when you have these initial conversations? Les Brown says there's a lot more power in the way you make people feel than in your accomplishments. I worked with a guy whenever we would have a meeting, no matter where we were, this guy would introduce himself and then start talking about how much money he used to make, how great he used to be in the previous occupation that he had. Just drove me nuts. I used to think, just don't do that. You don't need to do that. That kind of bragging it just doesn't bear fruit, I don't think. I think it's the absolute worst way to try to attract people into your life. Steer the conversation away from you. You have 2 ears to hear and 1 mouth, right? Listen more than you speak. More power in the way you make people feel. Judy, just like what you said when you go to the grocery And you can change a person's day just with the way that you talk to them, the way you respond to them.
And, and the thing is, they'll remember you. And
yeah, they will. They will.
The next time you go in, they will smile first. It's, to me, just an amazing thing, and so simple. Talk about lighting up the room. Those are just some simple things to do that, to be the giver and not always the taker.
Yeah. I love that picture, by the way.
Thanks. I did too.
We had some friends over not long ago. Things are different here in rural America than they are in the city. I think you have to recognize that. We don't have a single case of COVID-19 virus death in all of North Idaho. There isn't even one single case. There's I think total of 5 cases of COVID ID, no deaths in all of North Idaho, and very few in the state of Montana, which is next to us. So things are a little different for us, and we live out in the country. It's just life is different here. And the restrictions have been lifted to a certain extent here. And so we had some friends come out just not long ago, and we had a little cookout. I've got a little spot out here where I've got a fire ring, and I built a pavilion around it, and it's really fun. Anyway, they came out with their kids and stuff, and we just cooked some hot dogs and had salads and things of that nature. I watched a friend of mine. His name is James Stoner. He's the athletic director at our high school, 6'8", former collegiate basketball player, and one of the kindest, one of the finest men I've ever known. And I've known a lot of people, but I watched James Stoner while we were having that little get together, and he kept cooking hot dogs and things like that for everyone else. He cooked hot dogs for probably 8 or 9 people, all the children, the little kids. He just kept helping everyone else, smile on his face. Finally, when everyone else was taken care of, he fixed something for himself. Those kinds of things really touch my heart. I love that about him. I will never forget watching him do that. Does it just quietly. It's just who he is. It's inherent in his nature. But it's a great thing. He's a great giver, Judy.
Yeah, and there's so many ways to be a giver. I have 2 friends that they both light up a room. They're both givers, and they're so totally different from each other. So one of my friends, Sandy, she's that big, bold, audacious woman. She walks into a room, there's a smile, everyone smiles at her. She's loud, she's friendly, she makes sure that she talks to everyone, and she's an amazing woman. And then I have this other friend, her name is Lynn. She is humble, she is gracious, she is giving, and she goes into a room and she just attracts people to her because of the aura that she gives. And she lights up the room just with her silence. So it doesn't matter how you give. It only matters that you give. Isn't that true?
I was going to say, we have a classic example right here on our webinar today. Dan Hammer has been creating resource tools for Synergy Worldwide and for our group and for everyone else for years. And he's done that. He's been a giver, creating these things on his own time, at his own expense, for everyone else, to lift everyone else. What a great example Dan has been to all of us as well, as giving in our organization.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We are very, very happy that we are with Dan. I actually chose to be with Dan. Dan and I had a conversation this week, and I was in a different, on a different team in Synergy. I don't know if many people know that, but I was on a taking team. And I just was not comfortable with what was going on, and I chose to change, and lost all of my downline, lost everything because my upline wouldn't allow me to take anyone with me. But it was a choice to be on a team that valued each other and helped one another, from the day I started.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So do you have anything else to add, Bob?
I don't. I'm going to go take care of my beehives and go pick up some new bees today. And I've got a busy day ahead of me today.
And I could use some of those bees in my garden.
I bet you could. You got lots of flowers there. I could use the nectar flow, let me tell you.
We just need to live closer.
Yeah, too far to fly.
So are there any questions for us before we leave you today? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Hi, Bob and Judy. It's Donald.
Hey, Donald.
I just love to hear Bob's stories, and having met him, I know how genuine and they're pretty powerful to me. And Bob, I really appreciate you sharing them. It brings memories to me of some instances of similar nature. So I thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Donald. Love you.
Love you too.
Any other questions or comments? I think not.
I think not. So we are going to close this webinar today, and I just appreciate everyone being here, and we hope that there was at least one thing that was said today on the webinar that touched you in a way so that you look at people that light up rooms differently, and maybe how you light up a room differently. So everyone go out and share your light.
On Monday morning, we have a conference call on Monday morning every week, and Josh McKell is going to be on our conference call this coming Monday morning. Anybody wants to join us, it's at 7:30 Mountain Time. Be mindful of that. But yeah, Josh is going to be joining us, share some thoughts about what's going on with Synergy. So should be a great call. And thanks, everybody. God bless you all, and we'll see you all again before you know it.